back down to Campbeltown.
Hello, welcome back to another Whiskey review with me, the Whiskey Novice. Thank you for joining me for review number 94, part 2 of my series Back Down to Campbeltown. A series which is pretty much just a snapshot. It's always good to go back to Campbeltown, for me anyway. Certainly one of my, if not my favourite region of Scotch whisky. There you go. This one, almost a bit of a re-review, but not a re-review. I've reviewed Kilkerran 8-year-old cask strength before. I'll throw a link up here. That was batch number 3, and I did in that series and in that episode say quite clearly, watch out for batch variations. That was batch 3. This is batch 5. 2 almost totally different whiskies. Batches 1, 2, and 3 of the Kilkerran 8-year-old cask strength were matured in ex-bourbon cask. Batch 4 from, I think it was late 2019, either late 2019, early 2020, was recharred Oloroso. And this, the batch 5 from early 2021, is full Oloroso matured for 8 years. It's non-chill filtered. There's no colour added. That's a very, very good natural colour. So we're looking at probably some very active casks. I did say cask strength. This is 56.9%. And it's one of those bottlings that people were queuing up, battling each other to get their hands on one upon release. This went almost straight to the secondary market because it just sold out straight away upon release. I hadn't actually intended chasing this, but I didn't chase it. I was blessed that I had a friend within the whiskey community from here in Northern Ireland who contacted me and said, I accidentally bought 2 bottles. I'd only intend to get 1. Do you know anybody who wants one? And naturally, I was quite happy to take it off his hands, especially whenever I'd heard that it was the Oloroso matured, just if for no other reason, to see what it was like. Now, the thing I find about these bottlings that people are chasing each other for, they're like a good movie or a new movie, in that it's very, very hard then to avoid spoilers. This came out, and almost as quick as it came out, the bloggers and vloggers got on it and they were giving their views on it. No harm in that. But I was sort of sitting back for a while and waiting. You know, I didn't want to just jump in. So I was trying to avoid their views on it, because I always do that to try and make my own opinion then. But there were still a couple of things that I couldn't avoid hearing. One was that an awful lot seemed to think that the Kilkerran do ex-bourbon maturation better. It certainly suited this 8-year-old cask strength. The ex-bourbon cask worked better rather than Oloroso. And the second thing that they said, and we'll get back to that later, the second thing that I heard quite a lot was a note on the nose. So let's get into the nose and see what I get. That note was sulphur. And I soon discovered that, as much as I heard quite a few people saying that they got sulphur as an initial note, and I didn't, I started to think, is it just me? But then I was speaking to a few people after I'd opened my bottle, after I'd had a go. I was speaking to a few people, and it was a bit divisive, that some of them did get that sulphur note, others didn't. So it wasn't just me. It's just one of those things, you either get it or you don't. I don't. What I do get, and what I know about this whiskey, what I think about this whiskey, is to go in at this straight out of the gate and give it a good noseful is to do it an injustice. Plus, it'll probably lift the head off you. It makes your eyes water. It's young, it's spirity, it's rich, but it's young and it's spirity. And the initial thing I get is just that relative youth and quite spirited. Well, at the end of the day, it's 56.9%. Yeah, it would make your eyes water. It's quite strong. So let it settle. acclimate yourself to it, let it rest, and it will settle down. It will become more subdued. And you get greeted then by this, that alcohol nip starts to become a gingery, spicy, hot, chocolatey, rich, big sherry notes. I'm going to say big sherry notes. I mean the usual, the dried fruit, the fruit cake with the sherry added, all the mixed peel, all that richness, all that depth. I do get a lot of that dark. Well, there's a deep darkness about it. The chocolate actually is, I wouldn't even say it's dark chocolate. It might be a dark chocolate, but it's somewhere in between creamy milk chocolate and dark chocolate, and even hot chocolate drink. And even that fruit cake, there is a sweetness to this. Even that fruit cake then with a drizzle of golden syrup. Yeah, that even when it settles, the alcohol nip is there all the time. I find it remains rich, it remains deep and dark the whole time. Sweet, it is sweet, but it's a balanced sweetness. It's not overly sweet. And there's a bitter, slight bitter oakiness, not a heavily bitter oakiness. The oakiness is there, and it's just a bitter oakiness. And it's probably it too, which brings a lot of that youthful vibrance to it. Palate. I said earlier that it makes the nose makes your eyes water. Palate makes my mouth water. I've mentioned this before. I love a whiskey that'll make my mouth water. Just something about it there that's just firing off things in the palate. This is a deep, dark, rich, bittersweet delivery. All that sherry influence comes through with that deep depth of darkness and sweetness, and it's really well balanced for a young whiskey. It feels dirty but not too oily. It coats well, but it's also clean. I'm going to say that. I mean, there's a great coating with it, but it doesn't leave a clagginess or anything like that in the palate. It cleans well. It doesn't taste fresh. It tastes dark, tastes deep, as I said, but it doesn't. There's a freshness enough on the feel of it. The oak influence is slightly musty, but all of that richness of the sherry influence continues through it. It doesn't ever, for me, go flat. It never seems to feel flaccid. It's always got something going on with it. And it rounds out with a lovely, I'm going to say, chili heat and a faint, I want to say cigar smoke, but I think it's more cigar box and leather. There's for it being young, it feels like as if there's an age about it as well, but it is just a palate age thing. Finish. Long, dry, hot. Yeah, it's long. Still memories of that chocolate. Still memories of the tobacco, the leather. So the depth, the darkness. I mean, this whiskey has breadth, it's got depth, it's got length, it's got measurements. It needs, I'm not saying you should try, I'm saying it needs water, in my opinion, Don't be shy with it. I need to get some sort of other vessel, I think, for putting it in. There we go. That's probably that's over a teaspoonful, I would say there. It needs it. Because it's just a bit fighty in my opinion. It doesn't settle terribly well. Neat. Now, I may sound like I'm contradicting myself there because I was saying great things about it. But what I mean by that is the water just makes it so much better. The water tames it, stops it being such a young upstart. Takes a lot of that alcohol burned down and tones it down to a point where you can get your nose in and enjoy it. It turns up the sweetness slightly, but it makes that sweetness a bit fresher. There's orange now. There's a slightly tropical, like maybe lychee, I would suggest. It also adds more dried fruit, maybe apricot. The fruit is there then. It lifts that darkness out of it a bit. But there's, even with the water, the spirit is still there. It doesn't, you could add that water and you're not going to drown it. You have no fear of drowning it. The palate becomes almost deeper, almost darker, even though there was fresher fruit in the nose. Yeah. I think the water then starts to showcase that great Kilkerran spirit. It lifts a little of the cask influence out and showcases, as I said, the spirit itself. And I've never had the new make, but it just, there's a great feel with it. It just feels very, very natural and unplayed with, if that's a term. Finish remains long, remains vibrant, just feels more balanced, feels, yeah, it works better. The water, this ain't a session whiskey. This is one to keep in the cabinet and just go back to for that special occasion. But I'm not saying special occasion, but just to enjoy yourself, to enjoy a whiskey. Keep something like this aside. It's what most Campbeltown whiskies do it for me. Be they Springbank, be they Glengyle, be they Glen Scotia, that I pour them in my glass, I do something else, I forget about them, I go back to them, I'm sitting watching television and doing something like that, and every now and again when I put my nose in, I'll just bring a smile to my face. Yeah, very much so. With that said, I did mention earlier on that I heard this thing about the ex-bourbon cask maturation being better in a lot of opinions than the Oloroso maturation. Do I agree? Yeah, I do. I reviewed the batch 3, the ex-bourbon maturation, and yeah, I do agree. I think it works better as an ex-bourbon maturation. But I mean, I think it's great that Glengyle diversify. They move around. What I mean, we may see something different next time around. The 8-year-old isn't going anywhere. At some point, I hope to see a bit of a mixture somewhere along the line, maybe down the lines. And I mean, you're looking along the lines then almost of the Springbank 12-year-old, where we'll get a percentage of Oloroso and a percentage of ex-bourbon, I'm nearly sure, I would almost guarantee that Kilkerran will do that. Guy will do this at some point with a Kilkerran 8-year-old. Maybe not, maybe I'm wrong, but I would like to see it. These guys know what they're doing. They're just going to keep bringing us good whiskey. Yes, I think that the ex-bourbon works better. Does that make this one wrong? No, of course it doesn't. This is a great whiskey. Put this up against an awful lot of the great whiskies from regions all over Scotland, and this will knock them out of the park. I think what happens is that sometimes we wait, we join the queue, we fight to get our hands on these limited releases, and when they don't match expectation, then it's almost a disappointment. This is not a disappointing whiskey by any means. By any means whatsoever is this a disappointing whiskey. I think what happens is that it's just maybe slightly more disappointing than you imagined it would be. So it just sometimes then falls a little short. I think we just have to sometimes, I'm not saying catch ourselves on, but just take a longer look at it and go, well, you know, it might be not what I expected, but it's still an awful lot better than that one. Put it like that. I would highly recommend it, but not at the price they're charging on the secondary market. So let's just move on. Yes. I find it now. If you like this, then try this. Unless you have just started your journey and bought a bottle of this, it's kind of difficult for me to suggest something for you that you probably haven't already had. But I'm going to try anyway. But you'll probably already have had it, if you know what I mean. So if this is your bag, cask strength, maturation in Oloroso, youngish. You like this, give this a go. I've used it before, Aberlour, but this to me actually, only whenever I sat down and tried the two of them beside each other, did I realise that there was more of a likeness. And weirdly, you know, this being Campbeltown, totally different region, and this being Speyside, which you would think, but it's just one of those things that they do tend to sit in the same place. This was the batch 63, bottled at 61%, and it's that Oloroso maturation and the age probably as well. Given the option, I would prefer the Kilkerran. I think the Kilkerran just has a little more depth, a little more breadth. The Abuna is just a little, if this is fighty, this is a little more fighty than, you know, but both great whiskies. I'm sure most of you out there have already had a Abuna from some batch or another, be it samples or whatever. They are both great. I just prefer the Kilkerran in this. If you like this, prefer the, etc. But the other thing to remember, when you could buy this, the RRP on it was around, I think, £60 I paid for it, maybe £50 to £60. Yeah, I think it was around that, £50 to £60. That's a brilliant price for a cask strength whiskey. It's only 8 years old, granted. This is a non-age statement. Cask strength whiskey. And the price of this is just soaring. Probably double what this was, you know, this one on the market at. In fairness, you can't buy Kilkerran the 8-year-old now for love nor money unless you're on the secondary market. So it's one of those things, isn't it? Yeah, I do like this whiskey. I still prefer the batch 3 and prior. That's what I'll say about it. This is great. They were better. So there you have it. I'm going to come back next week with something different. Until then, thank you very much for joining me, as usual. Thank you very, very much to my patrons. If you wish to join that group, the link is below. Any pledge that comes in from the patrons all goes back into these videos, all goes back into the whiskey. So I can't thank them enough. So as I said, if you wish to join that group, link is below. I'll be back next week with something else, but from Campbeltown. As you know, until then, here's your good health. Cheers. Hey, thanks for watching my video. Please click and subscribe to be notified of further content.